guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Neighbor built his new driveway in front of my house, encroaching on my property. TLDR. Man buys the vacant lot that is next to my house to build his. It is very steep, so he builds a driveway from the street that ends up going through my property. I try to be civil and explain that it's my land, but he doesn't want to listen. Another neighbor parks his truck on my land so that none of his workers can get past it until the situation is settled. I end up with my land back how it was and a little bit of money for my troubles that I made sure to spend some of on my nice neighbor. The lot next to my house had been empty for a few years. The market was bad at the time, and while the pricing was fair, it clearly wasn't the easiest piece of land to build or work on. Many homes in my neighborhood were built on what was probably steep hills at one point. We mostly got around this by building the homes near the back of our property and having a driveway to lead up to it. This spot was the worst offender of the hill though, and we knew that whoever built on the property wasn't going to have an easy time. Still, when we heard someone had bought the land to build, we were happy to get a new neighbor. My area was very friendly, and we didn't really have any people that were problems like most neighborhoods seem to have. So even though the loud construction noises weren't ideal, nobody was upset about it too much. We would just wear headphones to try and tune it out and go along with our day. Everything was going great until it came time for the construction workers to plan out and pave a driveway. I know that in some areas this might be the last thing people do, but with this house it made sense to need it first. A straight driveway just wouldn't work, so they had to make almost an S-shaped loop up the hill between the road and the house. This way workers could get their trucks to the property without worrying about getting stuck on the steep hill. Again, this shouldn't have been a problem until one day I came home from the store to see that the new driveway they had paved ended up encroaching on my property. Because it was that curved S shape with the top cut off, the jut ended up being on my land. I didn't want to create much of a fuss, so I simply talked to the construction worker that seemed to be in charge and tell him that they made a mistake and ended up on my land. He showed me the instructions from the new owner and gave me his number instead. I wish I could say that talking to the new neighbor was pleasant, but instead it ended up in a huge argument. He was insisting that the entire driveway was on his land even though I had the paperwork and showed it to the construction worker. Still, he wouldn't tell them to stop, and they weren't willing to not get paid. We were at a standstill, and I know most people here would say to go get revenge and call the city on this guy. The problem was that this was such a friendly area, I didn't want to start a legal fight that could take so long. The entire house would be built already. I was talking to one of my neighbors about what was happening though, and he agreed that the new neighbor shouldn't have gotten away with building a driveway on my property. We didn't really have the room for a fence or anything, so that was why nothing was really set to show the property barrier between the two things in the first place. We did have a couple cheap bushes that ended up being taken away when the driveway was built. Honestly, if he had just asked, we might have helped him figure something out that would make it be not on our land at all, or at least a little less. We were now stuck in the position of playing nice or going through this whole debacle and potentially being seen as bad neighbors. The guy that lived down the block that I was telling this whole thing to have an idea and wanted to get my okay before putting it into action. He had an old pickup that looked like it really was on its last legs. He didn't actually use it as a car anymore, but it ran. So, he asked me if I wouldn't mind him parking it on my property for a little while. You might see where this is going, and making sure to only stay on our side of the property, he parked the truck right in the middle of the driveway. I asked him what he wanted me to do if they went to my door, and he said not to worry about it and just to give them his number and he would deal with it. I have had some health problems in the past, and this is the kind of neighbor that would come and help me shovel when it snowed without ever needing to ask. Anyway, the next day the construction crew couldn't get up the driveway and was not willing to walk all their equipment up the hill. They called the number and he said that his truck was on my property and not the owner's. So, since he wasn't going to budge, the construction company finally refused to work until we got this land agreement settled. Honestly, I thought that when I spoke to this guy again, he was going to blow up and demand I had the truck removed from his property. Instead, I was met with a much calmer man who said that he wanted to work something out with me. He agreed to have his driveway rebuilt in a way that wasn't going to encroach on my property anymore. He just asked that I have the truck removed so that the part of the driveway could be destroyed. Then he would plant over it like it was before. I also ended up with a small sum of money for my troubles over the entire situation. The neighbor down the block got a 6-pack of his favorite beer and a batch of homemade cookies for always wanting to help us out. He hasn't finished the house and moved in yet, but I am just hoping that when he does things will stay as calm in our neighborhood like they are now. I know that some people were hoping for a more exciting story where he went to jail, or I ended up with the lot. Sometimes though things can be worked out rather easily and still have a nice and satisfying ending. My peace was worth more to me than settling the thing in court that would have cost a ton of money and taken months away from me that I would much rather spend doing things I enjoy. That's it for now, and I'll be sure to tell you if I ever have problems with this guy again. The next story is titled, Being Sued by My Ex-Boyfriend. Illinois. I just want to say I know I've been pretty dumb. Last November I started talking with a guy the first met online. I am 22 and he is 26. We got along pretty well, and while I was not initially interested in a relationship, he said he would be in the area for work and asked me on a date. I saw no harm in this, so I went, making sure one of my girlfriends knew where I was. He took me to a really nice place, far more expensive than I'd ever have gone, and then asked me if I wanted to go shopping. I told him I didn't have much money, and he said he was paying. This scenario happened quite a few times over the course of last November till July. I was admittedly more interested in him than I may have been normally because he was buying me things. It was like a sugar daddy situation. I did things with him I would probably not have done even with someone I actually wanted to be with. He also sent me gifts and stuff, all of which were unprompted. Last month he asked me to come visit him for a week, which I felt uncomfortable doing. He lives a long way from here, and I had only met him in person a few times. I was starting to realize how little I actually knew about him. So, I turned him down, and was trying to decide how best to end the relationship when he sent me a message basically saying, I should just order you to come. That made me cut off the relationship. I blocked him, and now he sent me a letter listing thousands of dollars of expenses he spent on me, including flights, restaurant bills, gifts, and stuff like that. He claimed I owed him all that money and he was suing me. He also sent a physical picture of a screenshot of a message I supposedly sent him that I would pay it all back. It's fake. He also said in the letter I was a prostitute for him and that he was going to call the police on me if I didn't pay. My question is, what do I do? I know what I did was kinda shitty, but was what I did illegal? Do I call a lawyer? Update. Soon after my last post, my ex sent me a very expensive string of gifts in an attempt to win me back. When I ignored that, after a month or so of him sending flowers, letters, and all sorts of other things, he showed up at my door and knocked for over an hour until my roommate came home and called the police. He was gone by the time they got there. A couple of days later I came home, and he was waiting for me, so I drove off and called the police. My roommate said they told him to go away and not come back. At this point I had a chat with a lawyer, because I was very, very scared. And then we get to last week, where he was arrested after having broken into my house and was caught going through the mini fridge in my bedroom. Honestly, I'm pretty terrified, but he's in custody now. I'm working with my lawyer to get rid of him for good. I'm honestly considering moving when my lease ends at the end of this year. I've definitely learned my lesson. The last story is titled, My landlord and neighbor are accusing my dog of biting them. Will not provide proof or file reports. Can I be evicted over this? Wisconsin. So Wednesday the 22nd my dog did in fact jump on my neighbor as she approached him while my father and dog were entering our apartment. Why she felt the need to get between them I do not know. She was clearly startled, but there was no visible damage. I should add I do not have a good history with this neighbor. She broke in my first day of living here to use my oven and it's been hell ever since. I work with a previous tenant of this building, and she has horror stories. Anyway, about an hour later my landlord walked into my apartment unannounced and started screaming at the top of his lungs. When I came out to see what the hell was going on he was frantic, twitchy, and hysteric. His pupils were also dilated, if that tells us anything. He claimed my dog, that I'm allowed to have and is on my lease by the way, bit the neighbor and himself well over a week ago. I asked him almost 4 times why he didn't report it to the police or myself for that matter, and his answer was it doesn't matter and I'm a nice guy. During this insane conversation he would come up a step or two. I was at the middle of a staircase, he was near the bottom, and he would roll up his sleeves. This man is much larger than me and I started to become very afraid. He told me I had 24 to remove my dog or else. I asked what that meant. He said, "I'm trying to save the dog's life." He also threatened animal control. Now the steps I've taken since this occurred. I work at the Humane Society for this county. Us combined with the local police department are animal control. My dog has no previous bite history. He is current on rabies. If this bite even occurred, he would have to do a 10-day quarantine in my home and that would be the end of it. I know that legally my landlord cannot have my dog put down. However, after breaking and entering into my apartment, I do not believe my landlord is concerned with the law anymore. His wife is also my landlord, but she is just as difficult as he is. They have a huge reputation in this town, but I figured if we paid out rent on time and didn't bother them, they would leave us alone. I contacted the police and made a report of everything that happened and made sure they wouldn't be taking my dog from me just in case. They will not without a report and history of my dog biting, which there is none. I contacted Tenant Resource Center in Madison, the Department of Agriculture, the city clerk, to make sure I didn't break any city ordinances, and a law firm, should I need a lawyer, down the road. Thought they've yet to get back to me with the holidays and whatnot. The Tenant Resource Center had me written a letter to my landlords. The short version of the letter in that I outlined the evidence I was given for these supposed bites was only my landlord telling me they happened. No proof, and no reports. Therefore, I would not be removing my dog from my home. I let them know they have until December 28 to reply to me via mail or email and gave them that information. I also sent the letter certified mail so they cannot claim they didn't get it. Anyway, sorry I'm droning on, my main question is, can I be evicted for this? Every bump in the night I run for the door and make sure he isn't breaking in again. When I have to be away from home for work, I am terrified and constantly check in with my father and fiancé. I will not be attending family Christmas because I'm too scared to leave my dog here alone. I don't normally have anxiety, but I am petrified of the retaliation to come of this. At the same time, I'm livid and I'm sick of this husband and wife landlord team terrorizing my town. I can't find a single soul that rented from them that had a good experience. They break the law, and they blackmail their tenants. If anyone have any advice for me, I'd love to hear it. I'm sure I've missed some details as well, so any questions just ask. Thanks so much for taking the time to read. Update. TLDR. My landlord and neighbor were exposed in their lies. My dog never bit anyone. Still in fear for retaliation but feeling more confident. I got some really good advice here and the people who commented seemed to be interested, so I thought I would provide an update. So last night a police officer came to my door. He told me that my landlord had gone to the station and demand they remove my dog from the property for biting. That's not how the law works in my city. If a dog bites and it breaks skin, the dog must be placed under a 10-day rabies quarantine. That can be done in your own home if your dog is current on their rabies vaccine. If not, the dog must be quarantined at the animal shelter, which is actually where I work. If the dog bites again, it must leave the city. My landlord was clearly not aware of the law when he made his illegal threats to me. Fortunately, I was. Anyway, the police officer told him that if he wanted them to act, he and my neighbor needed to file reports. They asked him to show where my dog bit him. He told them he had no marks because he was wearing gloves. Convenient lie for something that never happened. The police dismissed him on that claim. Then he told them my neighbor had bites that broke skin. They informed him that she would need to go to the hospital and provide the proof, and a doctor would have to verify that these marks were indeed a dog bite. At the time the cop came to my house, she hadn't even left for the hospital yet. He seemed to find something fishy himself about that. He also knew her from her constant drama and run-ins with the cops, as did the other two officers a week ago. They seem very fed up with this woman. 3 hours later the officer calls me to inform me that there was a small bruise that the doctor said could or couldn't actually be a dog nip. No. Broken skin. The second I got off the phone with him I couldn't stop laughing. This was on her stomach too. When my dog jumped on her for attempting to enter our home and stepping in front of my father, she turned before he reached her. His paws, not mouth, landed on her back. Both my father and I saw this. My landlord also lied to me and told me my dog had broken her skin when he was screaming in my face. So that's that my dog will have no record, especially because they agreed with me that she provoked the incident. They didn't even tell me to be more careful in the future or anything because I did my job, and I followed the law. He did jump on her and she has every right to be scared, but not to lie. The police take into account what a person does to provoke a dog into a defensive attack. And they seem to believe he was indeed provoked. But regardless, that is behind me. I still fear what is to come. He took the letter to the police, they saw it with their eyes. I have proof of his retaliation after I did not succumb to his threat. I will be in contact with a lawyer about terminating my lease. I also believe they may try to evict me as well. That would definitely fall under the landlord retaliation law. My dog will also be muzzled outside while I live here. Not because I think he's actually going to bite people. He's a giant. If he wanted to bite, he would be biting, but because I'm arming myself from future lies. It's comfortable and he can eat, drink, and pant with it on. This isn't over yet, but I'm pretty sure I've won this one. Thanks for listening.